In the summer of 1979, during the show's hiatus, Coleman starred in his first film called The Kid from Left Field. With exposure and stardom came time-consuming responsibilities.
He was being pulled in a lot of directions for public appearances and appearing at fairs and benefits and guest appearing on talk shows.
In February 1980, 12-year-old Coleman won a People's Choice Award and the NAACP's Image Award for Best New Actor. The trophies brought acclaim to the show, but Dana Plato and Todd Bridges weren't pleased with all the attention concentrated on Gary. Writer Ben Starr.
There definitely was competition among the kids, all focused toward Gary, obviously. I don't know if that competition derived solely from the fact that Gary was making more money than anyone. I would suspect that was part of it, but more than the money, I think, was the fact that he was the superstar.
The money certainly contributed to their resentment. By 1980, Dana and Todd were each making less than half of Gary Coleman's $30,000.
He had always lived with. It was, to him, it was like breathing. I mean, it was just something that he did.
We always worried about him. I mean, here's this little kid putting in full time, as we know. We're not talking 8 to 5 here, you know. And periodically, he'd be tired.
There's medicine and regimens involved. And yes, you're gonna get sick, and you're not gonna be able to prevent it, and you're not gonna be able to stop it.
Gary's medical regimens kept him alive, but severely limited his growth.
They had told us at that point that he probably would not grow to be much more than 5 feet if he got to be 5 feet. And at that point, we thought, that's fine. I mean, his dad and I mean, that's fine with us. It was Gary who, you know, had to deal with that.
Gary handled the disappointment in private, but professionally things couldn't get any better. By the end of 1982, 14-year-old Coleman was earning a reported $70,000 per episode, making him one of the highest-paid TV child actors to date.
Gary was sure of himself, and that leads to trouble, probably. Then he got rich, and everybody knew he was rich. Led to more trouble, probably. Who likes a rich person, you know? He was the JR of comedy.
Coleman was rich, he was the star, and he was anything but humble. Anthony Tompkins had a recurring role on Different Strokes.
Gary was a little brat. He knows he was a brat. I mean, ain't no secret about that. But he was professional, though. You know, when it came time, when the camera turned on, he was right on cue, man. You know, but when the camera turned off, he wanted to wear a Superman outfit, and if he couldn't wear a Superman outfit, he was gonna quit the job.
Even Gary's friends noticed his unbecoming behavior. Teenage friend Stephanie Bracey.
Gary was pretty much given free rein to do whatever Gary wanted because he's Gary Coleman, so don't correct him type of thing. So his behavior was very different and odd compared to most people his age.
While Gary's father, W.G. Coleman, continued to work in Zion, Illinois, Gary's parents decided it was Sue Coleman's job to look after Gary. She had her hands full, especially when the cameras stopped rolling. Finally, in 1983, W.G. Coleman quit his $40,000 a year job and moved to Hollywood to help look after 15-year-old Gary.
W.G. wanted to be with us, so he talked to Gary, and of course Gary wanted him there. And so he decided then to take an early retirement and come to Los Angeles to be with us.
Gary's attitude did not improve with his father's influence. Anthony Tompkins' mother, Reverend June Gatlin.
Gary was tiny but mighty. He was very controlling. He wanted something, and he advised the world, per se, the production company, the staff, the set, everybody who was involved with this show, that it was his money, and he was paying their salaries.
Gary was a handful behind the scenes, but the show couldn't have been a bigger hit, Even First Lady Nancy Reagan made a cameo appearance to promote her Just Say No to Drugs campaign in spring 1983.
What you talking about, Mrs. Reagan?
Well, I happened to be here in New York, and I saw that story about you in the paper, Arnold. I'm concerned about drug abuse, especially among the young. And I was very impressed about the way you spoke out.
Oh, nothing any other fearless journalist dedicated to the truth wouldn't do.
But by 1984, the 16-year-old superstar could not control his failing health.
Gary, who of course had a disease that would have debilitated any grown football player, and Gary kept working no matter what happened.
Mary Jo Catlett played Pearl Gallagher, the third housekeeper.
One time he just looked so bad. He just looked not well. And he said, we have to take a break for a minute, and we all took a break. Maybe I don't know, maybe he needed to do dialysis.
On November 10th, 1984, Coleman put production on hold and checked into the UCLA Medical Center to undergo another kidney transplant. But less than 1 year later, Coleman's new kidney began to fail.
It was during his senior year in high school, and that just kind of shattered Gary. He was so looking forward to going to school that senior year and graduating with the class, and he was just kind of devastated when the kidney gave out.
On the surface, Coleman took the kidney failure and his return to dialysis in stride.
Well, put it this way, having a kidney is like having, what's it like? It's a foreign body. It's not yours, it's not ever gonna be yours, it just kind of matches what you had. And every now and then it's gonna throw a little curve and it's gonna cause some problems.
He wound up with no kidneys, with a belt around him. Thanks to his fame, he got a multi-million-dollar National Foundation for Kidney Foundation device that kept him going.
Medical advancements helped Coleman solve his physical concerns, but no one could change the difficult side effects.
Gary's size and his kidney trouble were both big problems. The bigger one was not the kidney, which was death-dealing, it was his size.
It wasn't helping that the 17-year-old Coleman was still playing a cuddly little boy, TV critic Ray Richmond.
I think it was somewhat unconscionable that they used Gary Coleman's stunted growth and medical condition almost against him to keep him young for their own purposes of making money. That's exactly what this was.
Director Garen Keith.
It was ludicrous, and it was a mistake that we made, and having him sitting on Mr. Drummond's lap, or and Gary was very, very aware of, here he's growing up and he wants to deal with issues common to any teenager.
Gary left as a lamb. Gary came back as a pit bulldog. He mad at the world.
And later, Todd Bridges lands on the wrong side of the law. The failure of Gary Coleman's second kidney transplant in 1985, only 1 year after his painful surgery, was a terrible blow to his health and his spirits. 17-year-old Coleman was physically exhausted and tired of his role on different strokes. In Different Strokes' 7th season, the former top 10 rated show was in a ratings slump. In an effort to revive the sitcom's declining ratings, the show moved from NBC to ABC, and producers revamped the cast. Conrad Bain's character, Philip Drummond, got a wife, and Gary Coleman got a younger brother. At first, the change was a relief for 17-year-old Coleman.
I was happy, because it meant that I didn't have to try and be cute and precocious anymore. I could actually be a little bit older and be a little older brother for him.
But Gary's enthusiasm for his role was short-lived. Friend Stephanie Bracey.
Every time I saw him, he was angry. He was lashing out, snapping at everyone, constantly, all the time.
Gary's mother, Sue Coleman.
There were times when he just flat out didn't want to do any of it. And rightfully so. I mean, you know, he was under a lot of pressure, and physically, mentally. And we'd say to him, you know, what do you think? You want to do this or not? You know, and he'd say, yeah, you do it. So you really don't have to if you don't want to. Yeah, I'll do it. He was not happy not working.
Gary wasn't happy working, and he wasn't happy not working. Something had to give.
There were times when Gary would tell me that, you know, earlier on, he would, in saying, you know, I don't wish to continue doing the show anymore, I want to stop, I'm not feeling well, he was always told, you know, you have an obligation, you know, you're kind of like living in the big world now. Just because you don't want to do that anymore doesn't mean you can just stop. A lot of people are relying on you and depending on you. How can you let people down?
Gary's parents worried about his mental state.
I think it would have been easy for him at points to just say, okay, I'm not worthy of this or worthy of that, just look at me. I don't have a kidney, I'm short, I'm tired and whatever, I'm just gonna go get in this corner and never come out.
Gary's frustration ran deep. Family personal assistant Dion Mial.
You could see this pressure cooker just beginning to rattle, and just beginning to rattle, and beginning to rattle. He just couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't see any way out.
In the spring of 1986, network executives gave Gary a way out. ABC canceled Different Strokes at the end of the show's 8th season. Gary Coleman was 19.
All I know is I was looking forward to moving on to doing some other things. And I was looking forward to getting on with the rest of my life.
But Gary was the victim of his own success. The diminutive child star was offered roles as children. 19-year-old Coleman was enraged, and his parents felt the heat.
He was angry at his dad and me because we couldn't do something to make the situation better for him physically. I mean, you know, we did everything we could, but there was just so much we could do. I think he was angry at God.
Dion Mial, the family's personal assistant, suggested that a vacation might help Gary's state of mind. In April 1987, the Colemans agreed to let the two young men go to Hawaii for 3 weeks. According to Mial, Gary had the time of his life.
It was one of the most liberating experiences that I've ever seen Gary have. I taught him how to drive a stick shift while we were there. We sailed, we did catamaran sails, we flew helicopters. We had 3 very powerful weeks of detox.
Mial claims Gary was confused and extremely unhappy. Mial was more than willing to share his opinion that the people closest to Gary, including his parents and his business manager, were taking advantage of him.
You don't have to have three PhDs in clinical psych to know what people's intentions are. The feelings and the misgivings that I shared with Gary laced together beautifully for him.
Gary Coleman returned to Los Angeles a changed young man, according to his father, W.G. Coleman.
Gary left as a lamb. Gary came back as a pit bulldog. He mad at the world when he reappeared after 21 days. And all that, I have no other explanation except that he was brainwashed.
Only 2 weeks after returning from Hawaii, 19-year-old Coleman with 26-year-old Mial at his side went on a rampage. To the outrage of his parents, Coleman fired Anita Thomas, his business manager. As his personal managers, Gary's parents advised him this was a dangerous move.
I said, well, Gary, if you do that, you know what's going to happen. I said, who else is capable? Who else have the background? As long as I am on the payroll in any way, as your manager, you are not going to relinquish anything from anybody as long as I have anything to do with it.
Gary hired Dion Mial to manage his multi-million-dollar estate. Mial's business experience consisted of being the Coleman family gopher and a part-time Michael Jackson impersonator. Within weeks, Dion informed W.G. Coleman that he suspected large sums of money had been mishandled.
I didn't have any concrete evidence of any wrongdoing, as it were. Any specific dollars, any specific contracts or paperwork. But in watching how he was being treated, you don't have to be a rocket scientist.
In late summer 1987, W.G. confronted Dion, demanding proof of the allegations. The argument quickly turned into an altercation. 1 week later, Gary Coleman filed a restraining order to keep his father away from both him and Dion. Days after that, Gary fired his parents, too.
He wanted his dad and I to step down. We did. It's kind of hard, say, losing my baby, so to speak. But knowing he has to grow up, then you step down and you go on, So we said, all right, you're old enough to handle it. We're gone.
Dion and his mother, cosmetic saleswoman Terry Miall, took over as Gary's managers. The Mialls suggested Gary call for an audit of his finances. Gary commissioned an army of retainers, lawyers, bankers, and auditors to scour his financial matters. In the meantime, Coleman moved to Colorado and did a short stint as a DJ at radio station K-High.
Gary wanted to do, at that time, still anything but television. It was something he could do behind closed doors. Nobody had to see him. It didn't matter what his wardrobe was, whether or not his hair was combed.
2 years later, shortly after Gary's 21st birthday, his attorneys filed a lawsuit accusing his former business manager and his parents of mismanaging funds.
There were some things that were discovered about his business that made us very uncomfortable, and they could really only be remedied by filing a complaint. And the reason that Gary's parents were involved was because they were attached to his trust, which held most of his holdings, as trustees along with the business manager.
Gary's manager and his parents flatly denied doing anything underhanded, but Sue Coleman admits she and her husband lacked knowledge about business affairs.
I know what's in my head, I know what I feel, but I don't know for sure that the business management or anybody else had done, anything. I mean, I have never seen this in black and white that says, that anybody did anything that was wrong. I've only heard accusations going back and forth of what his dad and I did. Well, his dad and I did nothing because we were not the business managers, we were not the bookkeepers, we were not handling the money.
The Colemans countersued. In their suit, the parents asked the court to appoint a conservator to oversee Gary's business affairs because they felt Gary was incompetent. Gary's attorney, Charles Wake.
It was asserted that Gary had fallen under the influence of evil forces, to put it in the vernacular, including Dion, and that as a result of these influences had stopped taking care of himself.
I mean, he wasn't talking to us and he wasn't expressing himself to us at the time, and we didn't really know for sure where he stood mentally and whatever, and if he did need help.
It was left up to a judge to decide if Coleman was mentally competent to manage his fortune.
The competency petition was quickly and summarily resolved when the judge hearing it took Gary into chambers for a 5-minute conversation, walked back out and said, "There's nothing wrong with this guy." And that was the end of the petition, to have him declared incompetent.
Finally, in 1993, the case came to an end. The Colemans lost the bitter family fight. The court decided Gary's parents owed him $1.3 million, mostly in unpaid loans and disputed pension fund allocations. Even though the courts ruled against the Colemans, Gary's lawyers admit his parents never knowingly took advantage of their son.
I don't really want to throw stones at his parents. I think they were probably well-meaning but misguided.
Gary Coleman may have won the battle, but in the messy, very public court proceedings, he lost his family. And he wasn't the only veteran of different strokes to experience difficulties at home. Life on Different Strokes fostered the image that Todd was the all-American boy.
I was the kid that always did everything right. I was the kid that always was against, the drugs and trying to help everybody.
But in real life, family problems were tearing him apart.
I was a little boy holding this hidden secret inside that was just ripping me to shreds. That, I loved my dad so much, but I just wanted my dad to be my dad. I just wanted my dad not to hit me.
According to Todd, the Bridges home was riddled with abuse and alcoholism.
My father was a raging alcoholic. He was out of control. He abused my mother, he abused me, he abused my sister, he abused my brother a little bit. My brother was away at college, so he kind of got out of that. So how could I not be affected?
Betty Bridges tried to shield her children, Todd, Verda, and Jimmy, from the violence in their home.
My daughter and I used to run downstairs in the mornings just to beat my husband out of bed so that we didn't have to hear Todd being hit for no reason. So we used to just get down there in time enough to make sure that he didn't bother them.
Betty struggled to maintain a sense of order in her household. She sought the assistance of a therapist, but Todd refused.
She kept trying to get me to go seek help, but at that age, at 16 years old, I thought that I didn't need any help and was nothing wrong with me, and because I was trying to cover up the truth that was going on inside of me, because I was hurting so bad.
As if the abuse wasn't bad enough, Todd was living with another terrible secret.
A lot of things went on that a lot of people didn't realize, and I'm not afraid to admit this too. I got sexually molested as a child by a friend of the family, a friend of my father's. And then when I had told my father about it, my father didn't believe me. My mom wanted to kill the guy. My mom went after the guy, my father, and then my father remained friends with this guy afterwards. And those are the things that destroys kids' lives.
Todd's only outlet was his work.
People on the show didn't know that I was mentally in trouble. They didn't know that because the front that I showed was always wonderful and everything was always happy.
Todd's older sister, Verda Bridges Perpich.
I think really just trying to figure out how come we were always happier on the set than kind of at home. Because he never got a break, he just, I could cry because it's kind of sad. But it was unfair, it wasn't fair. I mean, there was me and Jimmy. I think we could have handled it better than picking on the baby, the smallest one of everybody. I don't think he deserved it, and I think it confused because he loved my dad to death.
Finally, in 1982, Jim Bridges announced he was leaving the family. Jim and Betty were divorced within a year. The news hit 17-year-old Todd hard, actor Conrad Bain.
That seemed to be devastating to him. He just seemed to go up and never come down from that. That shook him.
Producer Al Burton.
Todd was having to do school, do the show, and live his life in a very glass bowl atmosphere while his parents split. And it was disaster, and we could see it.
In an effort to smooth over his troubles, Todd experimented with drugs.
I was such an emotional wreck that at that period of my life, drugs probably were the only thing that kept me from killing myself or kept me from dying, emotionally any sooner. That kept me going.
No one on the Different Strokes set was aware of Todd's new vice.
The drug use was not apparent. He was still able to come in with his lines and do his show, do a show, and do it well. Todd always knew what he had to do, and he was always there as a performer.
On July 20th, 1983, 18-year-old Todd was pulled over for speeding by the LAPD. The police searched the car and found a loaded .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun. Todd was arrested and booked for reckless driving and carrying a concealed weapon. 2 months later, as part of a plea bargain with the district attorney's office, Todd was given 12 months probation and fined $240. Over the course of the next few months, during his probation, Todd insists the Los Angeles Police Department began harassing him.
I endured being shot at. I endured being pulled over by the police every single day. If you remember, I was one of the first people talking about how bad the LAPD were and how judgmental they were and how they would pull me over because I was a black kid driving a nice car.
On September 24th, 1983, Todd, 18, was involved in another ugly scene with the LAPD. Todd's friend, Lee Harlan.
His car had broken down, which happened to be his Porsche that had his name, Todd B1, on the license plate. And it was just a dead battery. So his brother and I were starting the car with Todd driving it.
Someone reported that 3 young black men were pushing a car down the street. The caller implied that the car was being stolen.
By the time he had parked it, there were 4 police units right there on the scene.
They were telling me it was stolen. I didn't report it stolen, so it couldn't have been stolen. But they were going to arrest me.
The police told Todd to exit the vehicle.
Pulled him out of the car, put him on the ground, handcuffed him, arrested him, got to the point to where one lady officer actually hit him in the back of the neck.
A crowd of people came out of the house and said, "What are you doing? That's his car." And my mother, somebody went in the house and called my mother. My mother came down.
They had him handcuffed in the car, had Todd sitting down handcuffed, and one of the cops thumping Todd in the chest when I came up. And I said, "You get your hands off of my child." I said, "How would you like me to thump your child in the chest?" I said, "He has done nothing. What has he done?"
They're arresting his brother, they're arresting Todd. And I said, well, if you're arresting those 2, then you have to arrest me because I was the 3rd person pushing the car. And the officer looked me dead in the eye and goes, well, I don't know them.
Todd was incensed. He claims that the police continued to harass him and his family. Finally, 1 year later, on August 8, 1984, he filed a civil suit against the LAPD for harassment.
I filed a lawsuit. If people look back, way back for all my problems that were happening, I was one of the first people who filed a lawsuit against the LAPD. And the problems got worse with them. They harassed me worse.
As the pressures of his life increased, so did Todd's drug use. Although he was adept at hiding his drug habit on the set and at home, not everyone was fooled. Todd's brother, James Bridges.
I did know that Todd was using drugs before the rest of the family. I would nail him on it, and I would just say, because I was totally Mr. Clean. And I would tell him, it started off with a little, marijuana here and there, and I would say, Todd, that's going to lead to harder stuff.
To me, it was a nurturer, it was a savior of my emotions, because I was so out of control up here, I needed something to calm me down. And that's what I turned to, and I never expected to become a drug addict, and I did.
Todd's run-ins with the law continued. On July 11th, 1986, Todd, 21, was sentenced to a year in jail for making bomb threats to his auto customizer. The judge suspended the sentence and gave Todd 3 years probation. Todd was also required to undergo psychiatric treatment.
When I was getting in trouble, it wasn't cool then. And I put myself in a stupor when I started having a lot of problems because it wasn't cool then. It was very, very bad. Naughty, naughty, naughty.
In the fall of 1986, Todd began work on the last season of Different Strokes. Then suddenly it was over. The series was canceled, and 21-year-old Todd was on his own. There was little, if any, acting work for him. Worse, on January 18th, 1988, Todd, 22, was arrested again, this time for reckless driving. As Todd's battles with the law increased, so did his drug use.
I started fighting back. And then I feel so bad at fighting back that I go out and start doing drugs, more drugs, so that I wouldn't fight back. The more drugs I did, the less angry I became. The more drugs I did, the more I could cope with what was going on around me.
Bridges wasn't picky about the drugs he used.
My drug choice was everything. It wasn't just cocaine, I did everything. I was a trash can addict at that time. And whatever it would take to calm me down or soothe me, that's what I did. So it was a horrible choice I made, and at that point, I don't think I could have made any other choice. It was either that or blowing my brains out, and I wasn't going to do that, so, I turned to drugs.
The end of 1988 was not a happy time for Todd. He finally hit rock bottom.
Well, Christmas of '88 was when I just had enough, and I ended up, at the wrong place, at the wrong time. I was in South Central LA, getting loaded, and I ended up in the wrong place.
Coming up, did Todd Bridges pull the trigger?
I could have cared less about him or about shooting somebody. I wanted to get high.
alone, sitting on the steps of a seedy South Central motel contemplating suicide. He was broke, out of work, and addicted to crack cocaine.
Wanted to be left alone to smother and die away. Because I was basically trying to kill myself. That was the whole thing, a slow death. I was so demoralized, so crushed inside, and just didn't want to be around, didn't want to be alive.
Todd's family was horrified to hear reports that he was frequenting Los Angeles crack houses. Todd's sister, Verda Bridges Perpich.
My friends used to call me and tell me, Ferdy, he's with this gangbanger, this one. You know, what is he doing around there with them? He could have been dead at any time because people were dying left and right around him.
Todd's mother, Betty.
It's horrible for a mother to think of her child as just wandering around, half crazy, could die. At one point, I prayed to the Lord that if he had to be this way, take him. That's how close you get to wanting him to better be dead than to be like that, to be living like that, you know?
It's not my choice that I decided, hey, you know, I'm going to become a drug addict. Yes, yay, all right. When I grow up, I'm going to be a drug addict. That wasn't my choice. That wasn't what I wanted to be, but it happened.
In January 1989, 23-year-old Bridges was arrested, his fourth arrest in 5 years. He was charged with taking his BMW at gunpoint from a Compton, California repairman without paying the $500 bill. Bridges was released on bail. 2 weeks later, Todd was in trouble with the law once again, this time for his most serious crime to date. On February 2nd, 1989, gunshots rang out from a crack house in South Central LA. Kenneth Tex Clay, a convicted drug dealer and bodyguard for the house owner, was shot 8 times.
When the shots were fired, they said they were talking to me, and I looked up and just turned around and started running.
When police arrived, Todd Bridges was placed under arrest for attempted murder. Todd was taken into custody and bail was posted at $2 million. Unable to come up with that much money, Bridges spent almost 9 months behind bars awaiting trial. Betty Bridges immediately sought legal counsel.
I called up several lawyers, and they all said, I asked them point blank, I said, if you had a child who was in trouble like this, who would you get? And all 3 of those lawyers said Johnny Cochran.
Cochran, a high-priced attorney, agreed to take the case.
I remember seeing him in jail for the first time, and I'd grown up, or I'd watched him grow up, really, on television, so I'd, you know, felt that I knew him. I knew Willis at any rate. Maybe not Todd Bridges, but I knew Willis all those years.
No comments right now. Thank you very much.
At the preliminary hearing, Bridges pleaded not guilty to the charges. He claimed that he had been on a 4-day cocaine binge and did not remember if he shot Clay. Deputy District Attorney William Hodgman prosecuted the case.
The case was problematic from several respects. I had a victim who was very unsympathetic. The victim was basically a mercenary type character who protected a rock cocaine dealer and who was a fairly violent fellow in his own right. The other thing that complicated the case was the mere fact of Mr. Bridges' celebrity. Historically, you know, we as prosecutors have some difficulty in obtaining convictions against celebrities.
Bridges spent 9 months in jail awaiting trial until jury selection began on September 15, 1989.
And I remember this juror being asked some questions, and she said, I can be fair to Willis. She called him Willis. And I knew at that point that, you know, these people know exactly who he is, and that's probably going to help him, because it was a pretty lovable character.
The trial started on October 2nd, and the details of that violent night began to unfold.
The victim took a bullet in the mouth initially, which knocked him down, and he took rounds in the neck, shoulder, chest, and legs.
The prosecution argued Bridges shot Clay because he believed the drug dealer stole his BMW.
This man, Mr. Clay, survived and came in and said, Todd Bridges is the one who shot me at least 8 times. But this man, Clay, his credibility was very much in question and very much in doubt.
We presented to the jury a world to which had to be completely foreign to our jurors. I mean, a world where people are high on rock cocaine most of the day.
Cochran decided that Bridges should testify.
You want to put him on the stand. You want the jurors to see what kind of person he is. So I wanted to put him up there, but when he got to the key thing, he couldn't say to the jurors, you know, what happened. He remembered going in this residence, and things blacked out for him.
I was minding my own business. I was over there getting loaded. I shouldn't have been doing that, but I was minding my own business. I could have cared less about him or about shooting somebody. I wanted to get high.
He appeared to be very impulsive. He wasn't listening to the question. He would run on and on and on in terms of his answers. In my opinion, Mr. Cochran was having some difficulty controlling his own client as a witness.
Then the defense struck gold.
We scoured that neighborhood, and we found the next door neighbor to where Todd Bridges lived. The police hadn't really talked to him, had seen Todd Bridges leave the residence prior to the time he heard this number of shots. So we were able to say that Todd Bridges was not present when the shots occurred.
The jury was convinced. On November 2nd, 1989, 24-year-old Bridges was acquitted of attempted murder and attempted voluntary manslaughter. But jurors deadlocked on the third charge of assault with a deadly weapon. Bridges was released on $25,000 bail while he awaited a retrial.
Mr. Bridges, there are those who would say, it seems as though you just keep getting into trouble. How would you respond to it?
I just thank God that I'm able to be free.
Todd embraced his newfound freedom and was ready to jump back into his acting career. Executive producer and friend Al Burton.
On the day he got released from jail, actually he got a hung jury, and so he was let out. He called me from the courthouse. I said, if you can work Tuesday through Friday, I will get you an acting job to tell you that it's okay out there.
Burton was able to find Todd an unlikely role on his show, The New Lassie.
I gave him the only acting role left on that show was a deputy sheriff with a gun. And I said, it's awkward as heck, but Universal said okay, and everybody said okay, and we gave him the job.
The irony of Burton's casting decision raised more than a few eyebrows in Hollywood, but Bridges was unfazed. In fact, he hoped the role would salvage his tarnished image.
It's a very positive role, and it gives the kids a chance to see me in a very positive light.
Bridges' straight-laced lifestyle was short-lived, however. On May 5th, 1990, only 8 months after being released from prison, Bridges was again arrested with a friend in the San Fernando Valley and charged with possession of 48 grams of cocaine.
I got out and went right back to the same thing right over again because I wasn't ready to stop. I had not been emotionally healed. It had not worked.
Fortunately for Bridges, the cocaine charges against him were dropped due to insufficient evidence. But his drug use was back in full force, even as the retrial was pending on his previous assault charge. On August 10th, 1990, 25-year-old Bridges returned to court.
We were able to find the lady friend, the girlfriend of the man who lived next door. She didn't testify the first time, didn't want to get involved. So by the time of the second trial, I brought her in, and she was tremendous. She said, I knew Willis. I saw him. He came walking up the driveway after all the shooting was done and said, you know, what's going on here? And she placed him, you know, he wasn't there during the shooting. And she was one of those strong witnesses who sat down, okay, ask me any questions you want. And she was one of the last witnesses we called, and it made a big, big difference.
On August 23rd, 1990, the jury reached a decision.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Todd Anthony Bridges, not guilty of assault with a firearm.
As soon as they were discharged, they, meaning the jurors, stormed out of the jury box, practically ran over me in an effort to get to Mr. Bridges, and they were shaking his hand, they were asking for his autograph. One of the jurors, who appeared to be very conservative, was saying, God bless you, Todd, God bless you. It was quite a scene.
Todd became determined to turn his life around and spread his anti-drug message to others. In 1992, a year after he was acquitted, the former child star opened the Todd Bridges Youth Center in Compton. But once again, the temptation of drugs proved too strong for 27-year-old Bridges. On December 29, 1992, Todd was arrested after being pulled over in his car. retired LAPD Sergeant Don Goldberg.
A search of his vehicle revealed 1.5 grams of a substance that we believe to be methamphetamine. It's called crank on the street. It's basically an upper speed. Also in the vehicle was a loaded 9mm handgun, Ruger. As a result, he was taken into custody for transportation of a controlled substance and possession of a controlled substance while armed with a firearm.
After spending the night in jail, Bridges was released on $10,000 bail. The next day, Todd held a press conference at his youth center. Citing bad publicity from his most recent arrest, he resigned as head of the center.
I really have to work out these bumps and these grinds in my personal life so I can overcome that first. I don't think I've ever had a real chance to ever overcome that because every time I take a leap up, someone smacks me down.
With a trial pending on the drug and weapons charges, Todd's troubles continued. On March 7, 1993, Todd and David Kitchen, a tenant in his Sun Valley home, got into an altercation over unpaid rent. The fight escalated, and Kitchen allegedly attacked Bridges with a sword. Bridges retaliated by stabbing Kitchen in the chest with a kitchen knife. Once again, Todd Bridges was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. After spending 2 nights in jail, the charges against Bridges were dropped. Prosecutors concluded that Bridges acted in self-defense. Todd credits the incident with opening his eyes to his ongoing problems.
I realized that I had bottomed out, and I realized that this type of lifestyle could not go on anymore. That I had to do something drastically to change this, and I did not like using drugs. I did not like being this person that everyone was looking at.
On July 29, 1993, a hearing was held on Bridges' drug and weapon charges. Todd pleaded guilty to 2 counts of possessing and transporting a controlled substance while also possessing a firearm. Bridges was ordered to undergo 90 days of psychological evaluation, attend a live-in drug program for 1 year, and was sentenced to 5 years probation.
And in '93, the judge said, you're going to go to rehab or you're going to go to jail. And I was like, well, I don't want to go to jail. I'll just go to rehab. Not realizing that this miracle was going to take place in this rehab institute. And the miracle that took place was I realized that I was worth something.
29-year-old Bridges was released from rehab on December 10, 1994. Since then, he has been clean and sober and eagerly working to resurrect his acting career. But Todd wasn't the only Different Strokes star to succumb to drug abuse. Dana Plato portrayed the ponytailed darling on Different Strokes. In her role as Kimberly Drummond, Dana captured the hearts of millions. But Dana's character was not the focal point of the show, which was reflected in her salary. 20-year-old Plato seemed to take it all in stride. Director Garen Keith.
Dana had the kind of personality, and she's very mercurial, you know, and you didn't know what Dana you would have on a daily basis, you know. If it was a good day, the night before, or a good morning, she came in and it was like sunshine. She was wonderful. If there had been a setback, something negative, that's the Dana that you got.
Dana Plato's setbacks began in 1984 when she announced she was pregnant.
Dana came to work one day and she said to me, guess what, Connie, I'm going to have a baby. I said, what? She said, yes, isn't that wonderful? I said, is this what you want? She said, oh yes, I want it. I deliberately did that. I said, well, why would you want a baby now, at your age and where we are in the series? And she said, well, don't you see, when I get the baby, I'll never be alone again. I won't be lonely anymore.
NBC was not pleased with the news. A pregnant Dana was not the role model they needed for the show, and Plato was quickly fired.
It was just weird, you know, it was really weird. I was a little bit uptight inside, and all that came from was them letting me go the way they did. You know, that's when that was starting to come out, you know. And that's where that came from. That's the place where that anger came from.
Plato's anger subsided temporarily after a quickie Las Vegas wedding to her boyfriend and the father of her child, Lanny Lambert, on April 21, 1984.
Here I'm in this black dress that everyone knows because that's where you go to get your licenses to get married. I'm pregnant out to here. I'm crying, you know, and we're signing papers and people are recognizing me.
1 month later, son Tyler was born. In 1985, after only 1 year, the marriage fizzled. Plato and her son retreated to her mother's house in Canoga Park, California. Out of work and desperate, 21-year-old Dana started drinking. In no time, she was a full-fledged drunk. Friend Ray Slaughter.
She was pretty far gone. She was drinking almost a gallon of vodka and 2 six-packs a day at this time.
I was so wasted that it would take me a good 5 days to sober up to be able to go to work. Really, I was so wasted, sometimes 7. It took me a good week. So I'd have to do that, and that just got to be all too much.
A few job offers came Plato's way, but soon even small parts were too difficult for the fading star.
I was taking parts. They'd give me like Love American Style, and you know, I did some things. I wasn't auditioning anymore because auditions would come. I'd have to stay sober all the time. You know, I couldn't wait for the call. Hell, you know, it was like I'd take the drink and unplug the phone.
Life didn't improve for Plato when her adoptive mother died in late 1988 after a long battle with a rare blood disease. Plato just shut down.
I didn't want anyone around me, especially somebody who cared about me. Just no way. I had my own thing going, and I had to make sure I was working really, really hard to just destroy anything that came into my path. I really would put energy toward it.
Plato, 24, was clearly out of control. Barely able to care for herself, she voluntarily forfeited custody of her 3-year-old son to his paternal grandparents. Dana decided to move to Las Vegas. By 1989, Plato squandered every penny of her savings. Desperate to revive her career, Dana sobered up long enough to pose nude for Playboy magazine in June 1989. The 24-year-old was thrilled to get some attention.
I gotta tell you, it was just the darndest thing. They called me up and I was like, wow, cool. I'm thinking to myself, I would pay y'all, really, just put me in the magazine.
Unfortunately for Plato, the photos and her new image did not give her career a boost in Hollywood. In 1990, 25-year-old Dana returned to Las Vegas, where she took a job as a $5.75 an hour car jockey at Al Phillips drive-through cleaners.
I thought, wow, that's kind of, strange to come from a #1 hit TV show to working at a dry cleaner. But Dana said she quite enjoyed it. She made good tips, and that wasn't that bad a deal.
But Dana left that job due to a personality conflict with a co-worker in the spring of 1990. Plato was quickly bottoming out. She spent much of her time at a neighborhood bar called the Lakes Lounge. There she drank and played the nickel slot machine.
You get to a point where you've got no self-respect, you've got no anything, all you have is your bottle. You need to drink to get well. I needed to drink to get well 24/7. You know, it was very rare that I was drunk, really drunk. I was always wasted.
26-year-old Plato was out of cash, and her rent, $550, was past due. When her application was rejected for a $6 an hour job picking up garbage and cleaning bathrooms in her building, Plato turned to desperate measures.
As an alcoholic, you act out. I knew I was dying. I knew, my subconscious knew that if I didn't do something very, very drastic within a week or 10 days or 14 days, I would be dead.
On February 28, 1991, Dana did something drastic. According to Lake Video store clerk Heather Daly, this was a day she would never forget.
It was a Thursday morning. I got there at 10, and the first thing we always do is count our tails, like anywhere else. And so almost when I was done doing that, she came in and walked right up to the counter. She had a black hat on, black baseball jacket, and she acted as though she had a gun.
And I literally said, just like we're sitting here right now, I said, give me all your money. That must have just been the funniest damn thing she saw in her whole life.
My response was, you've got to be kidding. And she pointed at me and she goes,
no, I'm not kidding. It was just like this. You know, there's no threat, there was no anything.
She was very cool. She acted like she'd done it before. She had no problem with it. And I think that's why I was more in shock than fear, because it just didn't seem real at the time.
Heather did not reveal there was more than $1,000 in a nearby safe. Instead, the clerk handed over $164 from the cash register. That was good enough for Dana. With the money in her hands, she fled the store. It wasn't a clean getaway, however. Heather recognized the former actress.
I stood there in shock for about 3 minutes, and then I called 911, and I told them, the girl off Different Strokes, Kimberly Drummond, just robbed me. And the operator kept quizzing me as though she thought I was crazy. And I said, you tell me that there's a patrol car on the way, and I'll tell you everything you want to know.
Next, the details of Plato's bizarre crime.
When the cops took the money off of her, they knew exactly how many 20s, 5s, and 10s they had, and then 1s.
At the height of her career in the mid-'80s, Dana Plato was making $22,000 a week. By 1991, at the age of 26, Dana was broke, unemployed, and addicted to alcohol. She needed money. She turned to crime. One morning, Dana calmly walked into a Las Vegas video store, pointed a gun, and demanded money. "15 minutes after Dana Plato robbed a Las Vegas video store, the police arrived and immediately searched the surrounding area. In an alley behind the store, the police made two important discoveries. First, they found the black hat worn in the robbery. Then, the thief herself returned to the scene of the crime.
I came back down to give back the money genuinely. That's where my heart was. The first thing that dawned on me was, gosh, this just does not belong to me. So I went downstairs, down to give it back, unknowing, but knowing that I was going to get arrested. And I just basically walked right into it.
Video store clerk Heather Daly recalls a slightly different scenario.
I guess from what we found out later, she had been at the bar earlier. She was wearing a totally different outfit, went home changed, came and robbed me, went home within a 15-minute period from the time the first undercover cop got there, and was headed back for the bar for an alibi.
After Heather positively identified her, Dana was questioned and searched for evidence. The police discovered she was still carrying $140 of the money taken in the robbery.
She started saying that she had just cashed her check that morning and that's why she had money on her. But what happened was I had just counted it out. I knew exactly what bills and how much she had on her. So when the cops took the money off of her, they knew exactly how many 20s, 5s, and 10s they had, and then 1s.
The police had enough evidence for an arrest. As a curious crowd looked on, 26-year-old Dana Plato was taken into police custody.
It's just so funny because I wasn't threatening anybody. I never once yelled or screamed or acted obliviated or anything, you know. I just was very calm and peaceful. It was just funny, though. You know, you really would have thought that I like had a bomb on my body or something.
Dana was taken to the Clark County Detention Center where she was officially charged and booked for robbery with the use of a deadly weapon. Although Dana was used to having her picture taken, this photo op was a little different.
That's the only time I've ever looked at a camera and not smiled in my life. Naturally, a camera's in my face and I act an ignorant grin, and I didn't, and you can see it all over my face.
At her arraignment, Dana entered a plea of not guilty. Pending trial, bail was set at $13,000, and she was remanded into police custody until she could make bail.
I knew I was in trouble. I knew that. Yeah, I did. That one wasn't as bad. You know, that wasn't much at all, actually. I expected it. I expected not to come home for a few years.
But after spending only 5 days in jail, Dana was released. Her bail was posted by an unlikely benefactor.
Out of the blue, out of the clear blue sky, Wade Newton bailed me out. I had no clue. He didn't know me from the morning dew. I mean, he just didn't know me at all.
I think it probably was not as much Dana as it was the fact that this was a kid who came up in show business, had spent her entire life in show business, and all of a sudden found herself on hard times, and there was no one there to help her.
On August 8, 1991, while out on bail, Dana changed her original plea and entered a guilty plea. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but that sentence was suspended by the court and Dana was placed on 5 years probation. She was also ordered to perform 400 hours of community service. Plus, Dana was ordered to undergo counseling for mental health and substance abuse. But at that time, Dana wasn't ready to clean up her act. As part of Plato's treatment, her therapist prescribed Valium to help Dana deal with withdrawals from alcohol and bouts of depression.
I knew it wasn't going to work because the moment I walked in there, I had control of everything, and I made him think whatever it was I wanted him to think, and he bought it. You know, so right there, you know it's not going to work.
Dana became addicted to Valium. Dana's former attorney, Stuart Bell.
She soon became addicted to the prescription medication in the same way she had been alcohol. And although she had abstained from alcohol, now we just substituted one form of dependency for another.
Dana's friend and drug counselor, Ray Slaughter.
Well, they gave her a couple, 3 scripts, and of course the withdrawals went right away. She was happy as could be. But the scripts run out and he cut her off.
If you're taken off like that, you will go through withdrawals. You will. So he decided to take me off, boom, just like that, and I was like, hell, I need my drugs. You know, I need something. I need a drink, I need something.
Dana's therapist refused to authorize any additional refills on her Valium prescription. Angry, Dana abruptly ended her visits to the therapist, but she still had one problem. She needed her pills.
My ex-mother-in-law at the time, her husband was a doctor. I went there for Christmas, and I took a piece of paper off of his pad, and I wrote it out.
She found a prescription pad, came back to Las Vegas and wrote herself a prescription for 100 Valiums with 10 refills, which no doctor would ever do anyway, and found some pharmacist who filled that prescription.
Dana made a total of 4 visits to the pharmacy to refill the prescription for Valium. Once again, Dana's crime was poorly planned. Her father-in-law alerted the police that fraudulent prescription refills had been passed at a pharmacy with his name as the prescribing doctor. According to police reports on January 10, 1992, Dana's probation officer was notified that she was under investigation for forging prescriptions. 11 days later, as the police were getting close to arresting Dana, she paid a visit to her probation officer.
While she was in the probation office, they were in the process of preparing an arrest warrant and a revocation hearing, or papers for her, unbeknownst to her. Well, she sat there for an hour or two, and whether or not Dana instinctively thought that there was something wrong or this was taking too long or whatever, she confessed.
I went and turned myself in on that one because I didn't want to be messed up the first of my life. Like that.
After making a complete confession, Dana was immediately arrested and charged with 4 counts of burglary and 4 counts of attempt to acquire a controlled substance, charges that carried a maximum sentence of 86 years in jail.
I truly, 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 truly did not think I was going to come home for a while. I really didn't.
Dana's former attorney, Stuart Bell.
Prior to the hearing, my expectancy was that she would likely be revoked and sent to prison.
On March 14, 1992, 27-year-old Dana Plato entered a guilty plea before the Clark County Court.
In district court, the state is going to file.
As part of a plea bargain agreement, Dana was sentenced to 5 years probation, a $2,000 fine, and she was required to complete a substance abuse program. This time, Dana's attitude about drug rehab was different.
I went right into a program, you know, and I worked that thing hard. I did outpay. The thing about the program for me, it wasn't so much about being sober, but it was so much about identifying with what made me want to completely intoxicate myself. I wanted to learn about myself. I wanted to learn where my pain was, where all this came from. I wanted to know who I was.
But Dana was still facing charges for forging her Valium prescriptions. In August 1994, Judge Stephen Huffaker gave 29-year-old Dana a second chance.
He made statements like, well, I may be wrong about this, but I'm going to give this lady an opportunity and to prove herself, give her another chance, which I rarely ever do, which is true. He rarely ever did that.
2 years later, in November 1994, while still on probation, Dana petitioned the court for an early release from her sentence. Dana's attorneys contended that she had cleaned up her life, and they argued that she was trying to revive her acting career. But her probation required her to remain within Nevada state boundaries, so she was unable to take jobs in other locations. The judge was persuaded. Dana was released from probation on January 3, 1995, almost 2 years before her sentence was supposed to end. Although Dana did not get the offers from Hollywood that she hoped for, she did land a few roles.
You gotta make it alone in this world. All I need is one show. The talent's there, it's just a question of time.
In 1995, she played the female lead in a small Canadian theater production of the play Last of the Red Hot Lovers. And in 1997, 33-year-old Dana did her most notorious film to date, ironically called Different Strokes.
I will honestly say that's the only film I've ever taken for money. I thought, well, okay, few days, you know, nice wad of money. Let's try it, why not?
While the title echoed Dana's innocent sitcom past in primetime, one scene in the X-rated film showed her in a sexual act with another woman.
I played a lesbian in this film, right, which is already controversial. So I'm thinking, okay, this is cool, you know, this is going to be fun, because people are like totally going to get off on this one. And then it turned out that I had this love scene with a woman. Well, our nipples touched, and now it's X-rated. I'm in a porno.
On Friday, July 31st, 1998, 30-year-old Coleman surrendered to police officers in Hawthorne, California, after fleeing the scene of a crime. Gary, who was working as a security guard at a local mall, had gone to a uniform store to purchase a bulletproof vest. At the store, he was approached by Los Angeles bus driver Tracy Fields. Fields recognized Coleman and asked him for an autograph. According to Fields, Coleman's response was anything but enthusiastic.
And he gave me one really hard to my face.
Coleman was booked on assault and battery charges. Gary was in the headlines once again. But in 1998, Coleman preferred to discuss more positive things, like his work as an actor and as a security guard.
It takes a lot of stamina to do all that I'm doing, and I'm happy to do it because it makes me happy to work and be busy and be excited. Keeps me going.
According to Coleman, the turbulent times of life after Different Strokes are behind him. However, Coleman still demonstrates a theatrical flair. In February 1998, Gary crashed a Victoria's Secret bash dressed as a woman. At 30, Coleman says the problems with his parents are ancient history.
I normally don't talk about that because it is concluded. It is over. I have moved on. My adoptive parents have moved on.
But Gary's parents, Sue and W.G. Coleman, haven't gotten over losing their son in the ugly court battle that ended in 1993 when Gary won a $1.3 million suit against them.
He's 30 years old now, you know, and you would think, so gee whiz, it's time to stand up and face reality. That I'm not a little child anymore. Anything that took place, you know, before I turned 18 or whatever, you know, I can say it. Anything that took place prior or before, I forgive him, everything. I hope that he forgive me, because I ain't got nothing in my heart and way of feeling for him except for love and kindness and respect. Your mother and I both miss you, and like I said before, you can come home anytime you want to, you know. The house is always open for you.
Todd Bridges struggled to put his troubled past behind him. The father who abused him, Jim Bridges, died on January 5, 1997 of cardiac pulmonary disease. At 32, Todd finally has reasons to celebrate, including 5 years of sobriety, his marriage to Dory Smith Bridges, and parenthood. His son Spencer Todd Bridges was born July 15, 1998 in Atlanta, Georgia.
I think it's going to give me an opportunity to really, I think, do what my dad didn't really do. Really care for a kid, you know, really be there for my son. And just help him out and whatever he decides he wants to do.
In 1998, 34-year-old Dana Plato, America's sitcom sweetheart turned felon and porn star, returned to Hollywood. Friends claim Dana resumed her old tricks. Former drug counselor Ray Slaughter.
She called me and said that she'd been out shooting a movie or shooting something, and a friend of hers was watching her car, and he'd let them impound it, and this was Friday, and she couldn't get her check, $2,000 check, she couldn't get cash till Monday, and if I would wire the money, she'd send it back Monday, and that's the last I've heard of her.
Supporter Wayne Newton offers Plato some fatherly advice.
You've been given beauty, you've been given youth, you've been given intelligence. Those are things that God didn't give a lot of people. And he gave them to you to use them well. And you have gone through what you've gone through in order that you will be able to one day help other people go through similar situations. So now's the time to step up and be counted. Falling down is not a crime. Not getting up is the crime.
Dana Plato, Gary Coleman, and Todd Bridges were ill-prepared for the responsibilities and temptations of superstardom.
The media portrays us as being these icons, or portrays us as being these really...
Icon's a big word to me.
Yeah, but that's what I'm looking for, trust me.
Right, yeah.
You know, they portray people as being that, and then all of a sudden when they get let down, then, you know, it's a huge crushing blow to society when they're forgetting that this person's a human being, and, you know, he's entitled to make mistakes.
Right, we're going to trip,
mistakes,
we're going to fall, we're going to stumble.
Of
I'm probably going to stumble a couple more times before I see 60. Hopefully it won't be big stumbles, just little stumbles.
The final curtain of the sitcom that made them famous came down in 1986, but in Hollywood, a comeback is always just a phone call away.
The three of us are doing, I think, terrific. I mean, we're doing our absolute best to maintain, because we know our day is coming again.
I owe you $20.
Oh, well, there's no hurry.
Well, what do you mean? You were nice enough to loan me $20, a stranger you met in the park. Now, I said I'd pay you back today, didn't I? I insist.
Well, all right.
The thing is, I don't have the money. But I'm good for it. I'm the big star on television.
Well, I used to be a big star in television.
Not in this decade.
So much for the theory, nice things come in small packages. So happens I was on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. You know, the Smothers Brothers were big stars too, you know.
That's the funny thing about show business. People take a dive real quick.
Felons need a shot once they get out. And now I'm not referring to Todd. I just said felons need a shot to get a job. To get a job. Wait a minute. And if not, then they go back to the same old thing.
Yeah, give me a job. I don't want to go back to the same old thing. Please. I need help.
And cut. Thank you. Now we gotta go to work.